for joining Mickey and I for a story today. Don't forget to keep watching after our story and we'll show you how we made our little sled for our monkey George. Our story today is Curious George in the Snow by Margret and H.A. This is George. George was a good little monkey and always very curious. One cold day, George went to a winter sports competition with his friend, the man with the yellow hat. They were outside all morning and wanted to warm up with a hot drink. At the ski lodge on top of the mountain, the man said, "George, why don't you wait at this table while I get some hot chocolate? I'll be right back, so don't get into any trouble." George liked being on top of the mountain. There was so much to see. Why, there was something interesting. George thought it looked like a spaceship. He was curious what was that spaceship doing on a mountain? George forgot all about waiting for the hot chocolate and climbed in. A man in a racing suit saw him and said, "What are you doing in my sled?" He tried to stop George, but it was too late. The sled shot down the mountain with George inside. This is no spaceship, thought George. This is a rocket. "Stop that monkey!" the man yelled. But George could not stop, and there was no one to stop him as he sped faster and faster through the snow. Suddenly, the sled slipped sideways. George didn't know how to steer. The sled swished through some trees and whacked into a pole. Luckily, George was not hurt, but this was not where he was supposed to be. Now, how would he get up the mountain? George looked at the sled. It was stuck by the pole. He looked up the pole. Now he could see how a little monkey could get to the top of a mountain. George climbed the pole, and when an empty seat came close enough, he jumped. What a view! From up in the air, George could see everything. As he rode up the mountain, he watched tiny skiers race down. When he reached the top, George was happy to see the ski lodge. This was where he was supposed to be. George found the table, but he couldn't find the man with the yellow hat. Where could he be? George looked down the mountain. There was someone who looked like his friend. Maybe his friend was going down to get George. But how could George get down the mountain this time? If only he had another sled. Why, here was a monkey-sized sled. It says pizza, large, medium, small. George took down the sled and gave himself a push. The sled was quick to pick up speed on the steep mountain. George zigged this way, and then another way altogether. He flew over a hill and landed on the raceway. "It's a monkey," yelled a boy, and the crowd cheered. "Look out, little monkey," someone yelled from the crowd. But George was going so fast that the wind roared in his ears and he could not hear. But George could see. He saw a skier right in front of him. Could he stop? No. The crowd gasped as George crashed into the skier and flew up in the air. The skier went tumbling and his ski snapped right in half. When George came down, he landed on the broken ski and kept going. The crowd was amazed. "What is he doing?" they asked. "Is he skiing? Is he sledding?" "He's surfing in the snow," said a boy. George sailed down the mountain and came to a smooth stop. What a show! The crowd cheered as George took a bow. No one had seen skiing like this before. When the skier arrived, everyone was glad to see that he was not hurt. And they cheered for him too. Soon the man with the yellow hat arrived. He was glad to find George. George was glad to finally find his friend. The man with the yellow hat made his way through the noisy crowd to apologize to the skier. "I'm sorry George caused so much trouble," he said. "That's okay," said the skier. "I still have another race and another pair of skis." Then he said, "That was some skiing, George." Later that day, the skier raced again and won. It was a new record. The crowd went wild. They were still cheering when the skier found George at the finish line. "Thanks to you, George, this big crowd stayed to cheer me on," he said. "I couldn't have won without them, or you." He lifted George to his shoulders and the crowd cheered once more for their favorite monkey skier, George. The end. I hope you liked that story. Let's have a little fun and make a sled for our own monkey or Stuffy. So we have a little Stuffy here. We call him George, just like Curious George. We're going to make him a sled. You need to find something flat. If you want, it could be round, like George's sled in the story. So we found this lid off of a plastic container. Next, we need an elastic band. This is going to be George's seatbelt. And we're going to tape it onto the sled. We'll do 2 pieces of tape just to make sure it's extra secure. Once we've got George's seatbelt on his sled, we'll put him inside. You can use any Stuffy that you have. A small one works best, but if you had a bigger sled, you could use a bigger Stuffy. There we go. Our Stuffy's ready to go for a ride. Let's find him a hill. Okay.